Good afternoon, everyone. You know what? We weren't sure how this crowd was going to show up after lunch. We were debating if we were going to get a full house, and I want to thank everyone for coming out and coming to this session. Know your worth, how to negotiate and maximize your compensation package. My name's Kenneth Johnson. I'll be moderating the session today. I'm president of East Coast Executives, the leading diversity recruitment firm based out of Harlem, New York. And I'd like to introduce our panelists today. So we'll get this rolling. Please, Nathan Adams, please come on up. Mr. James Collier. And Mr. Albert Simien, Jr. All right, gentlemen. Excited to have you here, man. I got to adjust this chair so I can see you guys, man. What's up? Excited to have you all here today. I'm going to ask you to please do a brief introduction. Let our audience know a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do for a living, and then we'll get started with the questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nathan Adams, career coach from North Carolina. My superpower is that I help professionals advance their career, and I provide services like job search strategy, interview training, salary negotiation, resume writing, and LinkedIn profile writing. Glad to be here.
Good afternoon, everyone. James Collier. I am the Vice President of Sales for FedEx. I've been with FedEx for 35 years. I'm out in the California market. I have the 27 Western states. So just look forward to this conversation today.
Good afternoon, Albert Simien, EVP of Operations for UnitedHealth. I work in the part of United where we provide nursing, therapy, and aid services to a lot of folks across the country. So welcome and looking forward to the conversation.
Man, I'm looking forward to this conversation as well. You know, let's get it kicked off and just jump into what it's all about. Nathan, I'm going to ask you, because you're in the space, you're talking to people, you're doing resumes. As a black professional, as a black man in corporate America, how do we even assess our value?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, first step is you got to do your research. You know, we all want to make good money, but you got to know your worth. You got to know the skill set. You got to know your industry. You can't just walk into your manager's office and say, you know, I want X, without being able to justify it. So do your research. You know, sites like payscale.com, salary.com, comparably.com. Go and see what the market's paying for your role, and then be able to understand what value you bring to the table so that you can justify that salary.
Now, I can appreciate that you giving resources on how people can kind of take a look at it, but I'd like to also chime in. James, if you want to come in here, you know, what factors should we utilize even or consider when assessing our actual value in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Nathan said there's a lot of resources, and the importance of doing your research is key. You know, when I think about looking at an individual and looking at the value that they bring, you also got to realize that a company needs the best and the brightest. So what you can't allow is for the company to get you, but not at the value that you deserve. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we all face is, you know, it's a competitive landscape out there. We all might just say, you know, I just want a job. That's fine. But if you're going to bring a lot of revenue to a company, then you should be compensated commensurate with that. And a lot of times we just settle and accept because, listen, inherently we are a conflict avoidance type of society in general. And because of that, we shy away from those tough conversations. But you have to understand your value is what you deem to be for you. You can't let someone else set that for you.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think that's really important, kind of knowing what your value is and your belief in what your value is, right? And standing on that. I think someone earlier today had spoke about being realistic about it, but also being confident in the way you present yourself.
Amen.
So, Nathan, I want to go to Albert with this one. Albert, So as you kind of navigate the spaces, right, outside of general compensation, what other things should people be looking for as they negotiate, if they're at the table negotiating their compensation package, what else should they be considering in that process?
That's a great question. I say, one, first, understand what level you are in the organization that you're applying for. So whether it's director, vice president, senior vice president, know that, because that's going to be the first thing. Second is an employment agreement. Figure out, does this role have an employment agreement? Because those come with benefits and different luxuries like a severance, non-compete, or some things like that that we're not, you don't think about all the time. Third is just maximize the benefits that they provide, i.e. 401k. If your company is public and they offer a purchase stock program, make sure you lean into those things. Sometimes we jump in to this job, we're excited about it, we got this promotion, this job, is like great, but they don't tell you. Some of them sit down and tell you all the other things that you need to do to generate this wealth that's past your base compensation. So that would be a few things that I'll mention: employment agreement, 401k, and just understanding, if it's public, the stock options that may be your way.
I just like to piggyback on that.
Sure.
And I think it's important that you're not afraid to ask questions, right? An interview is a two-way thing. They're looking at you and you're looking at them. Some of the questions that you might ask, would be something like, hey, what is your merit cycle? And in that merit cycle, is it a pay per performance or is it a peanut butter approach? And what you're gaining there is, okay, if I don't have the ability to capture what I think I'm worth now, if I show my performance, then I know that I can ask in the future. So asking those questions on the front end, seeking to understand them, be understood, I think is so key.
I know we have a lot of professionals here. Can you just take a deeper dive into the whole merit cycle approach and kind of what that means?
Yeah, I mean, some people, they look at it as a cost of living adjustment. Some people look at it as a yearly cycle. But for me, what I look at, a merit increase is just that. It's based upon your merit. And the merit is performance-based. A lot of companies or individuals, they might look at it as, you have this 20-60-20 rule. And that 20% is where you want to be. You want to fly with the Eagles. And that's the top 20%. The 60%, they should just get equal to everyone else. The bottom 20%, they shouldn't get anything, right? So the key for you is as you go into a corporation is to be in the top 20%. And how do you do that? Sometimes you have to look at it as a career scaffold. A lot of times people look at it as a career ladder. I just need to go straight up. That's not necessarily. The more value you bring to the company based upon you taking roles that no one else was, it builds your base. And if you have a solid enough base, that vertical upward mobility is going to be very pronounced. So sometimes look at a career scaffold, not just always a career ladder.
It's a great point. I just want to make one point to that, because I've also realized that sometimes a lateral move is sometimes a way to go up. So first, sometimes you have to kind of expand, to your point, your knowledge base and be willing to take on those additional responsibilities before they give you the opportunity to advance to the next level. So it's a great point.
We talk about a lot of that in career coaching because we say people should stay T-shaped, right? So you have that vertical line of a T, and that's the core skill set, but what are you doing, on the horizontal line to add value and increase your presence there at the organization?
Yeah, and I'd like to say, I'm a Gen Xer, so my parents are boomers, and we were taught you get a job, you stay in it, and you work hard. Millennials, Gen Z, they're like, 2-3 years about. And so if you're mobile and you don't mind that, you can really get increases in your salary. I respect brothers who at a company 10, 20, 30 years, but you can move up that way. But if you got a certain position you want to be in mind, a certain time frame, it might take going from North Carolina to California to Texas to Michigan. If you got the family that can support you, you can really get gains that way. Because once you get locked into a company, 3%, 5% every year, you locked in. But you can get those different gains, higher gains, if you want to be mobile.
So let's talk about the higher gains. So James, I want to come to you with this, just based on the conversation that we had earlier, actually. But so if you're looking at equity and you're looking at, bonuses, you might be looking at benefit packages and things of that nature. How do you start that process to advocating for yourself to kind of increase those, or at least make them a little more substantial as you navigate and move throughout an organization?
Yeah, I think the key is the knowledge piece of it. Too many times we don't ask the right questions. And sometimes we're playing checkers and other people are playing chess. You can't allow that to happen. And what I mean by that is on a quarterly basis, I think sometimes from a relatability standpoint, it's important for me to share a couple of tidbits, but even for myself, I was one of those right there, Nathan, where I have been with FedEx for 35 years, but I went from North Carolina to Salt Lake City, Utah, to Fort Worth, Texas, to Scottsdale, Arizona, and now to California. But along that journey, I would do something that was very consistent. Every quarter, I would ask for a one-on-one with my boss. And I'd make sure that I'm maximizing things by their expectations and my expectations. And they have to be mutually beneficial. You can't be one-sided. As much as I love what I do, also know my worth elsewhere. And so the company is going to reward me for my performance, or I'm going to be rewarded someplace else. So staying with the company is only as good as how they treat the employees. So having those conversations on a quarterly basis, all right, so if I understand whether it be the merit cycle or whether it be additional stock options or bonuses, what are the key factors that come into play to achieve those things? And once they get that to you, you got to put your own checklist, because a lot of it is inwardly focused. You know, you can point the finger and say they, but you got three pointing back at you and say, what am I doing? So the key is advocating for yourself, having those quarterly discussions. This is my checklist of the things that I want. Now, how do I get there? You can't make that determination on how you get there. Someone else is going to influence it, but you got to have the conversation to make sure that they know what you know.
You know,
Let me piggyback on that. That's good. What he said was, and I like this, is he took the initiation. Every quarter, don't wait on your manager to come at the end of the year for the performance review.
Right.
Go to them, and then it's a group discussion where you set these objectives. You know what, and you want to have say in your objectives. Don't let the manager say, hey, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. Have a hand in that. So if you have a hand in saying what your objectives are, it's better for you to meet them, and you can increase that pay package.
Absolutely.
But yeah, own your career. That's the key. Own your career. Have those discussions. Be proactive.
so let's talk about that a little. So James's approach, he's working very systematically. Every quarter, he's having a conversation about his performance and how it relates to basically what he's being compensated at the organization. Are there any other ways or best practices, we'll say, that individuals should take to initiate those discussions? Anything, Albert?
Yeah, I would just say that, in the performance cycle, some of the questions may be, I make X, the merit may be 2, 3, 5%, whatever it is. I think it's okay to ask, where's that in the percentile ranking with my peers? Because you may be being paid at the 25th percentile, whenever folks that don't look like us, having the same position, same qualifications, et cetera, as are the 50th percentile or the 60th percentile. And so understanding not just the base compensation, but where you fall within that percentile in your peer group is very, very critical. So don't be afraid to ask those questions. And around STI, when it's make our bonuses, when they set the criteria, one question to follow up is, when was the last time someone achieved a similar criteria? They can throw out a 50% or 70% bonus, and they haven't hit it in 5 years. That's not compensation.
That's not compensation.
That's not compensation.
Yeah, amen to that.
Another thing to think about.
Amen to that.
Love it.
And don't be afraid to test the market. We get comfortable in our jobs, but every now and then, throw a resume out. Apply for a job just to see kind of where the market is. Because you might realize, I'm underpaid here. And so when that review comes up, it's nothing more powerful than the ability to walk away. And if you feel like you're locked into something that a company you're not necessarily wanting to be at, test the market. The market will give you feedback on where you need to be.
So let's talk about the feedback, right? So we're black men, we're in these spaces. Oftentimes, we don't have another person that's kind of on that same line to have a conversation with about compensation, right? So any thoughts on, in some states there are pay transparency laws, but that doesn't include the entire compensation package, right? Any thoughts on how people can navigate that dilemma? Because it really is a dilemma. You could literally be getting underpaid tens of thousands of dollars, but you're not aware of it because you're concerned about asking questions of your colleagues and peers because maybe you don't align that well with them. Any thoughts?
I'll just share this. I'll share a personal story and be vulnerable with you guys for a minute. I've been with the organization for 25 years before we got acquired. And at a certain level, the company started giving employment agreements. And because I didn't have a mentor that I could go to that looked like me, that was trying to help people, I didn't know about it till 5 years later. There was 5 years worth of equity that I missed out on because I didn't have the thought process or the help for somebody to say, hey, these are the things you need to think about. Here's how you go about it. And so having and seeking a financial advisor or a mentor, someone that you want to aspire to be or emulate, that has been there and done that, is going to be critical inside of an organization to realize what should I be asking for, especially as your duties expand or they ask you to do additional responsibilities. So, financial advisor, I think someone or a mentor that you can reach out to unlock some of those other value propositions is going to be critical.
Yeah, and I think a mentor is key, but in terms of internal versus external, you can't have a mentor if no one looks like you above you, right? So you got to look at different organizations and friends, and ask yourself, how big is my network, right? And you have to expand that. To Albert's point, I'd be vulnerable as well. I'm one of 12 officers in our corporation for sales, and I'm the only African American, right? And so there's no senior VP that's an African American in sales. So my journey in sales was just like that, exclusive of anyone that I could just reach up to and look at. So I had to build my network with friends and fraternity brothers and associations outside and try to gain an understanding. Do I think I left something on the table? Absolutely, I do. Many years ago. However, we're trying to help you not make the same mistakes that we've made. We've charted that course and that journey. And I should be further along than where I am. But if you don't have an advocate or truly a mentor, someone who's going to speak on your behalf when you're not at the table, you can't see what you don't know. So you just assume, I hit the goal. I hit the pinnacle of where I should be is right here. But boy, you don't realize that you devalued yourself significantly. So don't make that mistake.
It's a great point. I just wanted to make one to your point about your network. I had this person tell me that your network, is your net worth, right? It's not about who name you know, but who knows your name. Because when you're not in the room, you may know who that senior VP is or that C-suite, but if they don't know who you are and you haven't made intentional connections and you're fostering those communications, you won't get that opportunity.
Indeed. This is BMXL, so they've done an exceptional job historically of having wealth management professionals be part of the conversation. So everyone has an opportunity to take advantage of that while you're here. So I'm speaking about that, but also, are there any other avenues or resources that you guys are leveraging outside of, salary to increase wealth or equity?
Yeah. I'll jump in. I was kind of prepared. So first, Black people, we like to spend money. We just like to spend money. And you got to have a budget. You can't spend your whole paycheck. And maybe I'm preaching to the choir a little bit, but have a budget. I was always taught years ago, pay yourself first. Whether it's 401k, RA, whatever it is, pay yourself first. Set that aside and then have some play money, but you want to set that aside. So, do that, invest in yourself, and that should provide some success there.
For sure. Gentlemen?
Yeah, I was just saying, going back to my comment about the advisor, the financial advisor, diversifying your portfolio. So even if you're with an organization that's giving you equity or options or whatever it may be, figuring out, how to diversify that portfolio, whether it's getting into real estate, you just heard Don Peoples' session there, whatever that may be, you're gonna have to take some risk if you wanna create some wealth, some generational wealth, and some of that risk may be diversifying into places that you may not be comfortable with, but do your homework, figure out what the industry and markets look like. So I think, that's one way to do that is how to, as you generate that wealth and you generate compensation, how to diversify your portfolio.
Well, I'm going to just not add much more to that, but I think that whether you look at a financial advisor or whether you just have that common knowledge of what compounding interest means and putting a little bit away, a little bit away, a little bit away, you're going to see the fruit of your labor. I think to Nathan's point, I see some new Air Jordans, I want them, but do I really need them, right? And so then I got to employ that common sense approach to, are those Jordans going to make me fulfilled? It's going to make me fulfilled right now, but in 20 years when they're worn out and I ain't got money, then I'm going to not be fulfilled, right? So I think we got to employ some common sense to how we live our life, but I can tell you, Also, don't go to work every day to say that I'm not going to live a fulfilled life. And so I think that's the key as well. As Nathan said, you got to pay yourself first, enjoy yourself. But also, what is that cliche? You're gonna learn from your past. You're gonna plan for the future, but you're gonna live for today, right? Because none of it, you can always learn. But my point in saying that is, think about where you want to be, how you want to get there, but don't sacrifice living for the day at the same time.
I heard a key phrase I had never heard before in the wealth building. Somebody was lifestyle inflation. I forget the brother, the bread builder. But Kevin, he had mentioned that. And I was like, lifestyle inflation. So, and he said when he got his first apartment, it was, a little small, and then he got the first raise, he bumped it up. But the point is, maybe, let's change that thought process. Maybe take that raise and throw it in savings. I mean, you were living fine without it before, right? Throw it in the savings. Next time you get a raise, throw it in the savings. And just let that build. But you know how we are. We like to get that raise. Moving on up now. So just sometimes suppress that. That's one way you can build that wealth.
Sure.
Yeah, you mentioned lifestyle inflation. I call it lifestyle creep because it can happen in a moment. You have the tendency to figure my compensation. We're going on like 5 vacations this year. That's it. But how to scale back, and sometimes setting a budget. Someone said I think is important. Some of this may not sound like rocket science, but there's a discipline that has to happen to it. You create the budget. You can revise it as many times as you want, but you have to be thoughtful, intentional, and disciplined around how you're going to create your wealth and diversify it. Because if you're not, just like anything else, it's going to slip away from you.
James took us somewhere when he started speaking about Jordan, right? And I'm just thinking, follow me here. So the equity play is really important, and that's, kind of how he became who he is, right? As you speak to executives, they often speak that equity is the key to generating true wealth. If you can find an equity play at an organization, whether it's through that, stock options, any advice to our audience on how people can position themselves for those conversations?
I'd say, listen, don't be afraid of trade-offs. If they can't offer you the salary that you want, we ask them, well, what about stock options? What does that look like? Who are the people that are awarded that? And in my world, I can just tell you, I think in any world, give me options over salary, because I know that if I perform significantly better than everyone else, the value of the company's worth is going to go up, and I'm going to make more money than just the salary piece of it. So to me, it's just ask that question. Don't be afraid of a trade-off. It's still, I begin the way, I will reiterate what I began with, is never devalue yourself. Just don't. You leave too much on the table when you do that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think I would add is, know the stock performance too. Yeah. When you ask for it, do your homework about how that stock performed over the last 5, 10, 15 years, and you can have those trade-off conversations and say, I'll take a little bit less in base maybe, and more in equity and more in options or whatever it may be. But it goes back to do your research, especially companies that are public. They have to put out a proxy. All that information is public. You can just at the tip of your hands, and so utilize that to your benefit.
When we're speaking about compensation and just kind of delivering on a wealth promise, right, that we've made to ourselves to earn, are there any key considerations that you guys take into as you continue to kind of navigate and start thinking about maybe there's a better opportunity out here, right? Or maybe I'm not getting all that I deserve here. Any other key considerations that you're following, even when you get the feeling that something is maybe a little off and not equitable?
One thing that I would tell you is that as you get calls from headhunters or recruiters, take them. You're not committing to anything, but it's one way to also to revalidate where you are in the organization and where you are with your worth. And so having a conversation not commit you to go to another organization. And so that's been one tactical thing that I've done is people reach out, I'll have a conversation and utilize them as a resource to figure out what is the market paying? How does that compare to where I am and against my peers? And so that'd be one suggestion I would say.
And I think that if you are in the company, there's options and opportunities for you to come to the realization that you're looking elsewhere potentially if it's just financially, right? So if you're trying to just build wealth financially, then absolutely, the best way is to jump around, right? You're going to be able to do that. However, internally speaking, you got to make sure that you enjoy the culture, right? That you're growing, that you're flourishing. Because if you're just running for money, money is going to always be at the next opportunity. But are you going to truly have that fulfillment? So the things that I would always advocate for is, what's the environment? What's the culture? Are you going to be challenged? Are you going to be afforded the opportunity to develop skills and to be mentored and coached from a person that you can learn and grow from and that you respect? Because to me, people a lot of times never leave companies except for they're not fulfilled with the development of themselves, right? They don't like the leadership. And so if you feel that there's better opportunities out there, make sure those better opportunities are going to be for more than just dollars. You can get paid more, but if you're not fulfilled and happy, then what have you gained, right? So you got to make sure the culture is right for you as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll agree with that. And also, one point I wanted to make is, don't get blinded by the number. Again, it goes back to doing your research. Let's say you make 100K at some company, and you get an offer, and it's like 130. You're like, man, that's like 30K more. And you take it without doing research. And then you get on board and you realize that the minimum for that salary was 140. You just left 10K on the table and didn't even know it, because you thought, well, I had a jump from 100 to 130, that's 30K jump. Well, you left 10K on the table. So going back to the research part, make sure you know the market value for your role and the worth you bring. That's key.
One thing I was going to add to that's a great point, because not only just the 100 to the 130 to use that example, but understand what the benefit cost is too, right? Because if it's 130, but yet your benefit premium to the employer is double what you're paying today, are you really taking on the same pay? So you've made a big move for $30,000. You didn't ask the right question about how much benefits cost and all these things, and you come home, you make them take home less. And so you have to understand the entire compensation package, not just base, bonuses, and equity. Those are important, but the benefits, the things that are deductions from your paycheck to make sure that your net take home is actually creating generational wealth.
You know, I would say always ask an employer, what is that hidden paycheck? The things that are not right there in black and white, that are underlining, that are significant benefits that you might not know about, right? So, because you're right, you don't want to get more money to bring home less. So yeah, but that hidden paycheck, there's a lot of soft things that you might not be aware of that's available to you that you haven't maximized, and you realize, wow, I am doing more because I'm taking advantage of this.
You know, I love moderating these types of conversations because I'm learning, right? As a recruiter, we position people, and typically, you know, you're going to lead in with salary, right, and opportunity. So there's always key considerations. Are there any other key considerations? This is a two-part question. Are there any other key considerations that people should really take into mind as they're maybe considering making a move to increase their salary, right? And then, so I'd like James and Nathan, you guys to chime in on that. I'm sorry, James and Albert, I'd like you guys to chime in on that piece. Nathan, please give this some thought after them. When you're sitting in front and you have that offer, right? What should you be thinking about? Because you may receive a counter offer, you know, so what should you be thinking about in that scenario? So for you guys, what are the key considerations if you're looking at going to another organization because the salary's a little better?
You know, I still revert back to the aspect of what is the environment going to be like? I mean, are you required to check in at 8 and got to check back in again at 5? Or do you have the flexibility to be an entrepreneur and run your business, whether it be sales, whether it be whatever position that you take in? I think most times, you know, we're looking at the dollar, and that's the value of what we decide that our worth is. But to me, quality of life is as important. Right? I need to understand those expectations there, because if I'm punching the clock and I can't take my son to the dentist at 12 o'clock, is that the environment that I really want to work in for more money? Nah, it isn't. So you got to think about quality of life as well. I think that's equally as important as the financial reward.
100% agree. The only thing I would add is also the company's reputation, right? Because your name is your brand. If you go into an organization not knowing what that company stands for, right? Like, so does the company invest? You all are here, so your companies invest in these types of spaces. But if you go into an organization and you look them up and you figure out what people are saying about the company, if they're not leaning in to education or learning development or leaning into DEI, like, do your research about, do you want to align with an organization that's aligned with your goals? And if you're not, is it worth that $5, $10, $15, $20,000 pay increase? Something to consider.
So Nathan, people speak about not taking the counteroffer because there's going to be more work that comes with that, right? What are your thoughts when you're working with someone and they've decided to explore other opportunities, secured an offer letter, it's more money, but then their current employer counters? What are your thoughts on that scenario?
This is going to be highly biased from a career coach. But what I will say is that be careful with the counter. In your head, you're already gone. You've already made a decision to leave. And so what's your why? Why are you leaving in the first place? That counter may not be what you think it's going to be. So I caution my clients against a counter. I would say, if you made the decision to go, unless that counter is like something tremendous and it's resolving an issue you had for leaving in the first place, which might not always be money, then you may want to stay. But otherwise, go. Once you made the decision, go.
Gentlemen?
Yeah, I just say, I mean, listen, it's almost like a customer in sales. It's easier to retain a customer than to have to do all that work to gain a new one. So for me, in terms of career development, the reason why you're thinking about leaving, it's going to still exist. It's going to still be there. However, if you know the environment that you're in, having those quarterly conversations, like, what is the retention policy? You got to know, what is the retention policy? Do they have pools of resources that they're going to reward the best employees with? Because let's face it, if you're fulfilled at something in life, I don't care what it is, relationship, a job, whatever, you're going to commit to it and do it well. When you're not fulfilled by it, it's when you look elsewhere and do other things. And so in that aspect, just make sure that on a quarterly basis, you truly are having those conversations. What is the retention policy here? And truly understand what you're going to get yourself into before you decide to pull that trigger.
Now we're gonna jump into the Q&A, but I want to throw another question out to you guys. Everyone should view themselves as a business of one, right? And people speak about a return on investment and things of that nature. If you had to give one bullet point, and I'm going to put this out to all three of you, what would the thing be that you should position as your most marketable skill set, your value proposition when you're in a salary negotiation?
I'll just start and say, companies want people who can solve problems. And so when I'm writing resumes or LinkedIn profiles for my clients, I'm asking, what's your X factor? It's like, there's thousands of people who do what you do. Why are you better at doing what you do than anybody else? You got to know what your X factor is. You can't just say, well, I'm a marketing professional. Well, there's thousands of them. What makes you different? What do you bring to the table?
And if you think about an industry that you decide to be in, a lot of times you stay in there for a while. To me, the best value that you bring are recommendations and resources from existing customers that you've dealt with within that particular industry to the company that might be the competitor. I mean, you talk about value, so I already know this book of business that you're going to bring to me based upon you being in the industry, based upon the people that in our industry that you work with or dealt with, that your resume is telling me that these are the companies that I can either bring to you or that you can reach out to understand my abilities. And we all know you pay for one's abilities for not right now, but for the future of what they're going to bring.
Mm-hmm. Albert?
I would just say be flexible. And so if the organization allows you to do other things that may not be in your space and it gets you out of your comfort zone, we all know that's when you grow.
Yeah.
So when you're on the side of the table and you could be interviewing for HR, whatever it may be, then would you be interested in operations? Absolutely. Don't shut off don't close any doors you're having those conversations on the front end, because that could be a way to increase your compensation and your worth.
Excellent, excellent. I know we're going to go to Q&A. Is there a mic runner?
Oh, good afternoon. I'm Greg Tillman. I'm with the Merck Pharmaceuticals. I just want to take it back to your opening statement about how do you find the data. I'm a data man, and I look at different positions on those websites you told us about, but I'm challenged because I'm in pharmaceuticals, so they're always under what my industry pays. So what are other ways that I can truly find what my value is? And I'm at the director level, so I'm trying to find director positions that are compatible to the marketplace, but when I look at those websites, they're like $50,000, $60,000 below what I make. So I'm trying to understand where else would I go.
Now, are you looking at national data, or are you looking at data local to your state and region?
I queue everything because I'm trying to really understand what do I need to ask for when I go to the table.
Yeah. Another site that I don't recommend a lot, but it's actually a government site, onetonline.org, I believe. And ONET, O-N-E-T, online.org.
I think it's .gov.
Gov or org, but yeah, if you Google that, and you can find great salary history, statewide, regional across the country, and so that might be another option for you. And then like the gentleman here said, mentors, people in your industry, and even maybe your industry organization. A lot of times, those industry organizations will have salary data as well.
I'll just make one point just to say another tactical reason it may not. If you find, as you're looking for that particular job you're in that's similar to another company and you see it opening, call and inquire about it and say, what's the compensation? I've had folks do that as well. And so when you're thinking about, I'm not finding exactly what I need to match up with online, whether it be at, Glassdoor or Indeed or et cetera, you see an opening at another job, call that company and have interest and say, look, what's the compensation, what's the package? And that may give another way to have a good baseline.
As most things are online, how is that something that like our HR, they don't talk about? So how do you get to that?
Our company talks to people online all the time, and so I think it's just depending on the organization. But those organizations that would allow that recruiter to have a one-on-one conversation, leverage that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And one more point, there are pay transparency laws in some states. So some states now by law have to post those job ranges, which is helpful for the job seeker.
You're good.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Austin Harrison, a senior supplier quality engineer from Boeing. And I had a question. I recently received new certifications in the industry, and I have a new one coming at the end of the year. I was wondering and asking the panel, how would you recommend I could negotiate additional compensation? Should I wait to a performance review, or is there another way that I can kind of ask for additional compensation based off the new certifications?
Let me ask you, that certification that you received, is that just professional development? Is it company required? Because, I think that early in, the foundation has to be set day one. It can't be almost like a basketball game. At halftime, you can't say, what are the rules? So if you're going into a company, you're getting certifications, asking those types of questions, it's almost like prepping, right? If I'm going into an interview, prepping for the interview is the same as prepping for any other discussion. What are the questions? I'm going to play, a war game. They're going to say this and I'm going to say this. They're going to say this, I'm going to say that. You got to have that war game to yourself. So certification, these are my current credentials. What other credentials do you require or do I need in order to maximize the value that this company sees that's going to help us collectively be better? So it shouldn't be on the 10th hour, hey, I just finished this, now what do I get for it? Don't waste your time. Understand going into it what the value is going to bring back to you. If it's enrichment, then that's great. But if it's for financial gains, make sure you establish that early on. Because then at that quarterly conversation, hey, these are the things that I said I was going to do. Now that I've done that, what's next, right? So the key is always putting them in a position where they're forced to answer your questions.
Yep.
You control the narrative. Don't let someone else control it for you.
That's good.
Question?
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. My name is Matthew Pygott, and I have gone about this career trajectory a little differently. I've always followed my passion and my love, which has led me to not making as much money as I would like. But I've had some amazing experience. I'm a former mayor, locally in the city of Opelika. I founded a South Florida HBCU. I got a lot of different skill sets. But now that I have a family, I got 4 kids, I got a wife, I'm the main breadwinner, I believe I need to get back into that corporate environment. But because of my skill sets, like I've been doing HBCU, advocating for scholarships. Now I'm over building up the capacity of black businesses in Miami as director for membership services for the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce. Now I know that I need to get into a corporate, stable life. How do I make that transition when I got all these different skill sets, very recognized in my community, got a lot going on for me, amazing things on the entrepreneurship side, but I need to be a little more stable so I can focus with my kids and my family. What do I do?
Two things. Transferable skills, I think you said it, and then go to that site, onetonline.gov. It's an assessment. So basically it's like 60 questions. You answer those questions, and it'll say, based on your profile, here are some other careers that align with your transferable skills. Because I coach a lot of people who say, hey, look, I did good over here. I want to transition, but I have no idea how my skill set can transition. So being aware of your transferable skills and then taking that assessment will open you, because it'll show you different career paths and even what the salaries are, and you can even find jobs in those roles too. So I would start there with an assessment.
So I'd like to add that Nathan said something really interesting earlier, and that's about being a solution provider, finding out where people's pain points are. You're a master networker based on what you just shared, right? And I think you can leverage that to identify the people that need your particular skill sets for you to be successful. And that's probably the way I'd approach it as well.
How you guys doing? Appreciate the time and the insight you guys sharing. My name is Ricardo Yolis. I am a campaign manager of paid social at Zenith Media. And my question is, I've been at the agency for a little over 3.5 years now. Had a lot of experiences, been doing a lot, not only for the company, as far as our client, but also providing value from like a talent standpoint. I also founded and run an employer resource group for the black talent. And through that, we've been we've been retaining our talent as well. So I know that within my 3 years, I've got a lot of good experience and I've been bringing a lot of good value to the company. I have gotten a promotion, I've gotten a raise, but I feel that with the value that I'm bringing, it has surpassed this current salary I'm at just based off of my position as a campaign manager. So my question to you is, how should I tailor this conversation when going to advocate for more money?
Well, you got to know pay ranges as well. I mean, every organization has different pay ranges and job bands, and if you know exactly where you are, and you know that you maxed it out, and there's nothing else there, then you got to make other decisions. But asking the question, whether it be to HR or to your manager, and understanding, okay, I understand when I came in, I was an S1. I recently got promoted to an S3. The S4 is this band. How can I get to that? I think that understanding the parameters of the organization and where you work is going to be key. If there's not a sense of knowledge and understanding about what's all available, then you're just going to accept the status quo, and that's not acceptable. So you got to ask key questions to understand different bands and really what's next is what I'd say.
No, I agree. I think I said it earlier, just asking that question on where that salary fits within percentile ranking. Because you could be already at the 90th or the 100th percentile already. And so I think it's a great point. Knowing where you stand, knowing where the percentile is will help you give clarity on, am I maxed out or do I need to go into a different route?
We'd love to get to all the questions. We're going to take 2 more.
All right. Hello? All right. How you doing? First of all, I just want to say thank you, Nathan, James, and Albert, for all the knowledge y'all been giving. And definitely, Kenneth, you've been a great moderator too as well.
Thank you.
But my question is to James. You brought up a great point about work culture. And I'm pretty young in my career, like 2 years into my career. And I hear about stories of people who leave a job for a higher salary, but the culture is not up to par to what, accustomed to what they're doing. They're going through a lot more stress and a lot more mental, downs than they have when they were into a different role with less money. I would just have a question. Have you ever had to experience that, and how did you navigate those challenges?
I think we all have in different ways and capacities. You know, my level of acceptance of certain things are going to be different from yours. But as I shared earlier, each one of you, it's almost like you have to have a checklist about what's important to you. And then as you're going through this journey of either interviewing or accepting the job or staying with the job, you revert back to that checklist, you know, flexibility, culture, recognition, advancement, challenges. When you start to have more of why you're not having fun, then it's time to go. That's just the bottom line. It's just time to go. For me, as I look at my list on both pros and cons, the pros have always outweighed the cons. You just can't leave something because it's a moment in time. There's two different things. Either it's a trend or an event.
Yes.
And a lot of times emotionally, we make decisions on events. Mm-hmm. You gotta stay long enough to understand the cycle and the trend. Promotability for a lot of people comes from how you weather that storm in the worst of times. The high tide rises all ships. So if you're in an organization and the culture is great and you find yourself in a lull, you gotta ask yourself, what am I doing to get out of it? It's never them, it's me. I never give anyone that much control over my career, my mental health, my mental strength. And so when I find myself challenged in that world and those check marks starting to come from my pros to my cons, it's time to leave. That's the bottom line.
Appreciate that. Let's go to the last question, please.
Hi. Hi, my name is Sawar Kangalu, Manulife John Hancock. So I actually had two sort of comments that I wanted to hear your perspectives on it. One of the comments are around sort of valuing your benefits. I think that's a very underrated comment. So personally for me, for example, I know how to value my benefits. That's something I've done when I went to my new job. But I would say that a lot of people that may not be as technical, may not have the know-how, might want a little bit more of an explanation of how to do that, right? Just, we might know value our benefits, but what does that mean? Where do I get that information to actually value my benefits? And what do my benefits consist of? Do they just consist of just my sort of potential, what are the benefits, i.e. The sort of healthcare benefits that, are covered by my company, right? As well as my vacation days, maybe. Are there more, right? All those things maybe might be nice for you guys to comment on and give insights on. And then the other portion is kind of promotions as well as salary. Being someone who is now in a leadership or management level role, I've gotten some clarity and insight into salary and comp and everything that I've never known before that I wish people did tell me. For example, promotions are not merit-based, right? As much as we would like them to be, they're not. And I'll argue that even salaries are not merit-based. And so we may think that we're worth a certain amount, but at the end of the day, right, a manager or a company or a business line might have requirements. And so if you don't fall within those requirements, or if the tap is done, you may not make it. So how do you help us kind of recognize this?
Great. Short version. I'm going to have Nathan, I'm going to have you take the first question, I think. That's probably... no, I'm going to have you, Nathan, take it. No, I'm going to have Albert take the second one, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the first? That was a long question.
It's an answer, but he wanted you to explain, how do you break the benefits down? How do you know what's the value in the benefit package?
Yes, that's probably more, because I know, Albert, you brought that point up. So that's probably more...
Yeah, I can bring it. I'll just say this, when you're interviewing, or whether it's a company you're looking for, they will offer you a benefit. They will show you, and you should ask for, what's the benefits package? Breaking it down line item by line item, from health insurance to vision to dental to whatever it may be. And so they have to be transparent about that and what the employer costs and what the employee costs are. And so asking for the information, going back to knowing the questions to ask, but I would start there. And then as you're looking at it, figure out how that lines up to where you are or to the offers that you're getting, because PTO and all those things will be in that benefits package. So I think that's the first place I would start It's asking the right question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Your second question, I couldn't really make out what you were asking on that one. What's the question? Okay, I got you. Yeah. I'm going to encourage you, I think it's a multi-tiered question, right? I think there's a multi-tiered answer to it as well. I'm going to encourage you to reach out to the members of the panel on LinkedIn and maybe give a better description, because it sounds like it's something that's directly related to what you're going through right now, because I think it's a very individualized answer. So I think you may benefit more from kind of reaching out and talking to someone here on the panel, and you can give me a call as well. All right? Listen, I'd like to thank everyone for participating, but I want to give the gentleman on the panel a round of applause. I'd also like to give the gentleman on the panel a moment to give a closing remark, and then let everyone know how they can stay connected with you.
You start?
Yeah, we're going to start.
You can find me on LinkedIn. So shoot me, please connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the best way to get in touch with me. Final comment, I would say your health is your wealth. So we talked a lot about compensation packages today and how you prepare for it, but you have to also be ensuring that you're taking care of your mental, physical, and emotional selves too. Because if you're not, then you won't be there to generate the wealth down the road. And so as you think about that, you have to be here. And so as much time you spend in compensation and wealth generation, also reflect on how you can be, making sure you take care of yourself.
Appreciate it. I'm on LinkedIn as well. And, my final comment to you is being here is voluntary. So you already made an investment in yourself. And I think that's key. Never stop that journey of wanting more for yourself. Never stop that journey of getting to the end of your comfort zone, because that's when you start to stretch and learn and grow. Never forget the aspect of taking lateral moves to get more invested in knowledge in the company in order to get that vertical. But you got, it's almost like the Empire State Building. You can't build more floors unless you expand the base. And the way to expand the base is just more knowledges, more challenges, more opportunities. Never be fearful of raising your hand and saying, put me in the game, coach.
Yeah, and so you can find me on MySpace. No, I'm just you can find me on LinkedIn, of course. And so what I'll say is, one, do not be afraid to negotiate. Get past that. Know your value, but then also practice. Don't go in cold into a negotiation.
Right.
Practice. Colleague, friend at home, mentor. Practice. This is, we don't negotiate, well, technically we do negotiate every day in something, but when it comes to salary, promotions, leaving a job, taking the new offer, practice that, because that's a stress intense type conversation. So you don't want to do that like first off, practice and go through, the different points and prompts and see how you respond to these questions.
My name's Kenneth Johnson. You can catch me on LinkedIn, but also you can go to eastcoastexecutives.com to find out anything that we're doing. I want to encourage everyone to look at this conversation about maximizing your compensation and just think about human capital and social capital as well. There's a lot of people here today that can be of huge benefit to your career moving forward. And as we've heard some of the speakers earlier speak about networking, that was a big theme on it. Networking, being prepared, being ready, and moving your best foot forward, and maybe bringing someone along with you. So I want to encourage you all to come back next year, bring somebody with you, but also use the capital in this room so when you come back next year, you're meeting people that you've had conversations with previously, and they can support your careers. I'd like to thank all the panelists. I'd like to thank the audio and video team, and I'd also like to thank Black Enterprise. Alfred Edmonds here today. Alfred, if you don't mind just standing up, I don't want to put you on the spot, brother, but he makes a lot of this stuff happen for us. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you all.